This past week, Mrs. Russo came to my home and she gave me the video that we just saw. I'm so grateful that I watched it before I came, because I cried so much after I watched it the first time that if this would have been the first time of my watching this, I could not have said a word. To me, this proves that 6 million is a lie. It's not 6 million, it's 60 million. Because every one of them could have been a father, a mother, a grandfather, a grandmother, a great-grandfather, a great-grandmother. And you know, when I saw the film, the first thing that I thought of was, this really puts our lives in perspective. How in the world can we worry about petty things that go on when you see a video like this? So you didn't get the furniture, so the delivery didn't come on time, and so your child got a 95 instead of 100 or a 75, but you have a child, and one day you're going to be a bubby and a zaidi. And when we see this film, this is really a time that we have to be grateful that we live in a great country and that we can have an event like this, and that we can learn and we can study and we can grow. And that's the purpose of getting together tonight. It's not only to talk about our past, but to talk about our future. You know, there's a very interesting Chazal. Chazal tells us that every generation has to have stars. Why is somebody called a star? A star is somebody that you look up to, just like you look up to stars at night. And the question is, who are the real stars of a generation? And the Gemara in Bava Basra Daf Ches Amud Beis tells us, "Umatzdikei harabim kakoichovim liyolam voed." Those that make the many righteous, the Rabbanim, like Rabbi Schoenfeld Sr., Rabbi Schoenfeld Jr., if you can call Rabbi Schoenfeld Jr., Rabbi Scheinfeld, all the other wonderful Rabbanim that we have here in Queens, from Rabbi Steinberg and Rabbi Oldbaum, one after the other. We're so fortunate to live among these people. Who are the real heroes? Those that teach children Torah. And when I learned this Gemara, I was wondering, what makes them a star? And you know what makes them a star? Based on what the Mashah tells us, something fascinating. Tonight you go out at night and you see the stars, so you know that they're there. On a clear night you can see hundreds of thousands of stars. But in the daytime you can't see the stars. But if you have a brain in your head, you know the stars are there. And that's what a great Rebbe is. That's what a great parent is. The great Rebbe and the great parent is there even if you can't see them. Long after you've gone out of the classroom, long after you've left the Dalit Amos of the Rebbe or the Mora or the Manal or the Menahelas, when you have to make a decision, who are you going to marry? You're going to think, what would my Rebbe have said? What would my Mora have said? What neighborhood should I live? What would my Rebbe have said? What would my Rosh Hashiva have said? That's what a star is all about. A star is there even if you can't see them. That's what a real star is all about. That Rebbe, that Mora, that parent that has made such a lifelong impression, you don't have to see them anymore. But you're thinking all the time, what would they say? That's what it's all about. And tonight we've come to talk about those type of stars that we can no longer see. But they are the real stars, because they are the ones who died al Kiddush Hashem. And that's what we've come to learn from. And you know, when I was preparing for this talk, I was wondering, as Rabbi Scheinfeld mentioned before, for years, the survivors, they never spoke about it. Never said anything about it. So if that's the case, why should we come and talk about it? They didn't talk about it. So why are we talking about it? And I'll tell you a fabulous answer. The Kloisenberger Rebbe, who Nebuch lost a wife and 11 children, was once asked, he said, how is it that so many who lost so much, parents, children, siblings, spouses, how are they able to build? Look at this, so many people here. Can I know so many people in the world that are those that were built by these who went through the Gehenna in this world. How did they do it? And the Kloisenberger Rebbe gave a brilliant but puzzling answer. He said the answer is B'damayich Chayi. Now, when the people asked him that question and they heard what he said, they said, Rebbe, what do you mean? B'damayich Chayi is something that you say by a bris, in their blood they shall live, something that we say by the Seder, Leil Pesach. But what's it got to do with the question and the answer? The answer was B'damayich Chayi. How did they build? And listen how brilliant he explained it. He said B'damayich doesn't only mean in their blood. We all know that when Aaron HaKohen lost his two children, the Pasuk tells us, Vayidaim Aaron. Aaron was quiet. Zok the Heilige Rebbe, B'damayich doesn't only mean blood. B'damayich comes from the word Vayidaim. They were quiet. In their quietness, they lived. They didn't focus on the past, because if they would have focused on the past, they couldn't get by one day. They knew they had a job to build. So B'damayich, in their quietness, and not talking about the past, but just knowing what their job was for the future, Chayi, that's how they built it. But now, after all these years, when we see the Halakite of what they built, as Rabbanim mentioned, the yeshivas, the kollel, the Beis Yaakov, the communities all over the world, then now we can begin talking about it. Now we can assess what they really were and what they really meant. But if they would have spoken about it right after when they came out, they would never be able to build. So as Rabbi El mentioned, I've had the opportunity numerous times to be in Auschwitz, to be in Majdanek, and it's just impossible, no matter what video you see, until you're there, and to witness it, and to see that the barracks are still there, and the shoes are there, and the talesim are there, and the suitcases are there. And so every time when we go there, I tell people, I want to give them an approach, how we should walk through Auschwitz, how we should walk through Majdanek, which is literally just a few miles from Lublin. And I tell them as follows. The Pasuk tells us when Yaakov Avinu heard that his son Yosef is alive, Vayome Yisrael. Yisrael means Yaakov. Yaakov said, Rav, it's wonderful. Oid Yosef b'ni choy. My son Yosef is alive. Elcha ve'erenu b'terem amus. Let me go see him before I die. So the simple meaning is Rav. A Rav is called a Rav because they know a lot. Rav, my joy is great. But the Medrash teaches totally different. Rashi is teaching according to the Pshat, but you know what the Medrash says? Rav koiche shel Yosef b'ni. Vayemi Yisrael. Yaakov said, Rav, my son is greater than I am. Shekamat tzoros higiu. He had so much tzoros. He had the problems with his brothers. He had the problem with Potiphar. He had the problem in everything, all the time, sold from one group of Arabs to another. V'adayin hu oimid b'tzidkoi. And he still remained a tzaddik. The Heilige Yosef HaTzaddik. He's much better than me. Because I had problems and I questioned Hashem. But my son, he's greater than me. Rav, because he went through such Gehenna, and he's still Adayin Oimid B'tzidkoi. And that's what I tell the people as we stand outside that gate in Auschwitz. Or if we go to Majdanek, just remember, Rav, those people are greater than we could ever hope to be. And I tell them the story about that person on Hanukkah who wanted to bench Hanukkah left. Where are you going to get a menorah? So did you ever realize that 2 forks equal 8 prongs? And that they took some wax and wound it around each of the prongs of the fork, and every night they got a little cotton, a little wick, and they put it on one of the prongs. And then by the 8th night of Hanukkah, they held up 2 forks, and that's how they were able to make Hanukkah licht. And we're worried if we have a big silver one or a little silver one, or how much oil it's going to light a whole night. We'll never be like them, never. And that's how we have to look at these people. Rav, they are greater. and we have to talk about them with the rest of their Eretz. I want to share with you some stories about some of the people who lived during that era. There's a woman that I love very much. She's one of my favorite women in this world, and I can say it because she's 96. She's my son-in-law, Shlomo David Pfeiffer, his Oma, Mrs. Ilse Roberg, who lives in Detroit. I'm telling you, if you're ever in Detroit, you have to go and speak to this person. An incredible human being. She's so incredible. She just bought a new car. She's 96. So she went to the Motor Vehicles Bureau, and this little 22-year-old chuchik, was registering the car, and she takes a look. She can't believe, are you the one who's registering this car? She says, how long are you registering it? She says, 5 years. She says, 5 years? What are you going to do after 5 years? She said, I'll re-register. So Mrs. Ilse Roberg has her head screwed on straight. So she told me, it was 1938, it was before Kristallnacht, a few months before. Her husband Alex was teaching in Stuttgart, in the yeshiva, and the day he taught Hebrew studies, and she taught English studies. They had just gotten married, and at that time already in 1938, they were rationing food. So you could only get a certain amount of bread, no Yid could buy chocolate, you could only get a certain amount of butter, and you could only get 4 eggs a month. 4 eggs a month. So she told me that every Friday she would take 1 egg, and she made a little cake for her husband Alex, and that was the specialty for Shabbos. They didn't have much food, but L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, that's what she used the egg for. She saved it for Friday, to make a little cake for Shabbos. She told me one Friday, Alex was teaching, she's home in the kitchen, and she opens up the egg, and it has a Blutstrop in it. And she can't believe it. This is the only egg that she has for this week. And now the egg is treif. She can't use it. So she told me she was thinking, it's really just on top. Maybe I could just wipe it off, and then it didn't pierce the egg yet. So maybe I could use it. But there were no Rabbanim to ask. All the Rabbanim were taken away already. She had no parents. So she told me, she figured, look, I'll make the cake, I'll scrape away that Blutstrop, and if we ever get out of here alive, I'll ask her Rav if I did the right thing. Mustam, he'll tell me that, look, you were poor, you didn't have food for Shabbos, it was okay. And if he says that I shouldn't have done it, so I won't do it again. And then she said to me, she thought of her husband Alex. And she thought of the Rabbeinu Shalom. And she said, Alex trusts me. We know how much men know about kashrus in the kitchen. Very little. So they rely on their wives. She said, he trusts me. He'll never know the difference. Only Hashem will know the difference. I'm not going to use the egg. I can't betray him, and I'm not going to betray the Rabbeinu Shalom. And so she told me. She threw out the egg, washed out the dish, and now she had another decision to make. Does she use next week's egg for this week's cake? Well, this week we won't have a cake. So she told me, she figured, who knows if we'll even be alive next week? I'm going to use next week's egg for this week's cake. She washed out the bowl again. She cracked open the egg, and out came 2 yolks. And Mrs. Ilse Roberg, Oma Roberg, told me, such a beautiful, beautiful thought. I want to quote it exactly. She says, sometimes the Rabbeinu Shalom sends you a small, insignificant message, but it's all a person needs to carry them for the rest of their lives. Those 2 yolks that came out of that second egg showed her, the Rabbeinu Shalom is saying to you, you're my daughter. You I can trust. Because nobody would have known the difference except me and you. But you are faithful to me. And you're my daughter. And you're the one that I trust. An incredible, beautiful story of a person who was so poverty-stricken, but was Rav, perhaps greater than any of us could ever hope to be. I didn't think about it until tonight, that I'm going to talk about the relatives of the Schoenfelds, Rabbi Shlomo Jakobowitz. Rabbi Shlomo Jakobowitz was a Rav. He was actually a principal of a whole network of schools in Toronto called Eitz Chaim. And I remember one year I was traveling to Eretz Yisrael. I had already known him because I was in Toronto numerous times to talk for the benefit of his schools. And it's important to remember that it was the year 2000. And we're flying to Eretz Yisrael for Sukkot. And you know, when you see one child after the other is extraordinary. His brother was Lord Emmanuel Jacobowitz, and he is who he is. And there was a third brother in Montreal. One is better and bigger Talmud Chacham than the other. So anytime I see children like that, one after the other, I always like to know what the parents were like. So I said to him, you know, you must have had incredible parents. Tell me something about your father. It's interesting, his name was Yoel. So he tells me his father was a Rav in Berlin. And again, this was also in 38. And we know that Kristallnacht happened November 38. This is October. Sukkot is always in October. So he said his father's mitzvah was Sukkot. He loved sitting in the sukkah. That was a mitzvah. Every one of us has a mitzvah that we feel very close to. So he told me that they lived on the third floor, and they had like a little deck in the front porch from the third floor, and that's where they would have normally made the sukkah. But now everybody was afraid because the SS guards were already marching up and down the streets. So how are you going to make a sukkah? They'll look up, they'll see a sukkah, they could not only break the sukkah, take the people to jail and take away their jobs. Who knows what could be? So he told me that his father showed him the first Mishnah in Sukkah. Now anybody who learns this Mishnah in Sukkah, they're trying to figure out what in the world are the Rabbanan talking about. Why would they even teach us this halacha? You know what the halacha is? That the smallest type of Sukkah, the lowest height that you could have for a Sukkah is 40 inches, 10 tefachim. That's about from the floor this high. Not that floor, this floor right here, 40 inches. Who in the world is going to build a sukkah like that? Why did Chazal teach it to us? They taught it to us for Rabbi Yoel Jacobowitz. You know what he did? He realized that if he measured the wall, the retaining wall, and it was 44 inches high. Now, don't forget, he's on the third floor. So he builds a sukkah 40 inches high. This high is the sukkah. And he puts schach on top of it, so now it's 2 inches of schach, so it's still 42 inches. So when the SS guards are marching up and down, and they look up, they can't see the sukkah, because the wall is 44 inches. And the sukkah is only 40, plus 2 for schach. And he told me they didn't miss one meal. They put pillows on the floor, he went in the sukkah. Okay, the wife and the daughter didn't eat in the sukkah. They didn't sing Zmiris. That they didn't do. Right? Nobody should hear. But they didn't miss one meal. A ganze sukkahs. They sat on the floor on pillows. That's Rav. That's people who went through those times, those bitter times. And yet, look how they responded. It's an amazing thing. I had this chus. You know, many of you know me here personally. I mean, I grew up with Chaya. You know, before I knew my wife, I knew Chaya. But all these people from Kew Gardens, we're like brothers and sisters. So she knows, and everybody knows here, that my father passed away when I was 21, and there were very few people who wanted to help me. Rabbi Schoenfeld was a dear friend of my father, Olav Shalom. It's one of the only Rabbanim who trusted a 21-year-old mohel. I don't know how you did it, but I'm grateful that you did it. I would come into a house and the grandmother would say, "Oh, you look so young." So I would say, "What? The baby's also young." But Rabbi Schoenfeld trusted me. A lot of others, you know, they said, "You get experience in 5 years." 5 years. We all would have starved. You know, I was supporting my mother, my younger brothers and sisters. But one of the people who helped me was Rabbi Jacobowitz. And his wife, Amelie, was like a sister to my mother for all the years. And I became very, very close to the family. When I go to England, I always stayed by Elisheva Hamburger, which is Amelie's daughter. And I'm very, very close. So Amelie once told me this amazing story. You know, they lived in France. She was the daughter of Rabbi Leo Monk. They lived in France. And then they had to run because the Germans occupied France. And she told me about a friend of hers, Gertie. And Gertie, her father, also was in France, and he had to run. He had to run from where they were, and they had to come to Paris. And now Gertie and her mother and the two sisters, they were living alone because the father was taken to the army. And Nebuch, then the Germans came deeper into France. And they had to run away, and they went on trains, and the trains were packed. And some of the people, everybody was desperate. We should never, ever know from those situations. They were desperate. And what happened was that they tried to get on the trains, and sometimes there were little kids on the train. They pushed the kids off the train because they wanted to save their own lives. So many times, this little Gertie was pushed from one side of the train to the other. She couldn't find her parents, her mother. Every time she found them, except one. And of course, that was the last time. She didn't know where her mother was. She was afraid to be on the train alone. She got off, and she slept in a forest one night, and she realized this is not an ASIC. So Amelie told me that this Gertie told her, she knocked on a farmhouse, knocked on the door, and the fellow said, I know where you're from, come. I have another girl that's in the basement just like you. I'll protect you, don't worry. And she came, and she was in the basement with this other girl in this farmhouse. And within a few days, 2 boys, all these kids were less than 13, less than 12, little kids. So now there were 3 girls and 2 boys. Each one was afraid to say what the truth of their background was, but eventually they all admitted to each other they were all Yidden. And this farmer would bring down food to them every day. And they were in a cellar, there was a window on top. Obviously they wouldn't go out, but they could just see the sun. And they knew when it was day and when it was night. And Gertie and Amelie would tell the story every year at the Pesach Seder. She said, all of a sudden they began realizing as the days were going on that the sun was brighter and that there was grass that was growing near the house. So that meant that soon Pesach is coming. Now this farmer was a goy, so he wouldn't know when Pesach is coming. So they decided they're going to designate a day for Pesach, and somehow they're going to try to get a matzah. So what did they do? You wouldn't believe it. So they asked the fellow that he should give him some flour, bottle of water, a newspaper, and matches. And listen to what they did. They took the flour and the water, they mixed it together, they took the matches, they lit the newspaper, and the boys, who were a little bit more brave, held this flat flour and the fire underneath, burned it, or lit it, warmed it, less than 18 minutes, and they had the weirdest looking matzah they ever saw in their lives. But then they had a Seder. Now, no new clothes, no wine. So the boys changed clothes with each other, so that's new clothes. And the girls exchanged clothes. And one boy remembered Kiddush. One girl remembered Manishtana. And they sang Dayenu, and they sang Chadaja, whatever. And that was the Seder that they had. Rav, greater than we could ever hope to be. And Amelie would always say to her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, we should never know from that type of Seder. But the Eibusha should help that all our Sedorim should be as holy as that Seder was. That's what it's all about. I want to share with you one of the most moving moments of my life. As was mentioned before, I have the opportunity to travel to many of these places where Yiddishkeit flourished. And a couple years ago, for the first time, I was going to go to Hungary. And I have a mechutin, Alex Kramer, and I told him I'm going to be in Budapest. And he said, I'll come with you. He said, I can't come on the whole trip. I'm a kohen. You go to the Kvarim and you daven there. I can't be by the Kvarim. But I was born in Hungary. So I'll meet you. I said, I'm going on the last day of the trip. You'll only be there one day. You're going to schlep from Los Angeles all the way to Budapest. He said, look, I want to be with you for that day. I have relatives. I haven't seen them in many years. It's kedai for me. We go through the whole trip. The last day we come, and I'm coming into the hotel in Budapest, and sure enough, Alex and Shana Kramer are there. And as we're sitting eating dinner together, I tell her what my plan is for tomorrow. And I say, you know what, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the Stipler said that any place where Yidden died, Al Kiddush Hashem, that's a Mokan Kodesh, and it's an Inyan to daven there. So I told him that before I went to Budapest, I went to Mr. Schoenberger in Brooklyn. And he told me what happened along the Danube River. Along the Danube River, Nebuch, they had taken Yidden, and they shot them, they tied Yidden together, and they shot them into the water. But they didn't shoot all the Yidden that were tied together, 2 or 3. They only shot one. And the force of him falling into the water dragged in the other 2, and those other 2 were drowned. A Misa Meshuna Mamish. And he told me that Eli Wiesenthal. No, not Eli Wiesenthal. What's his name? No, not Eli Wiesel. No, Raoul Wallenberg. That's the name I'm looking for. I knew it had something to do with Spring Valley or Muncie. Raoul Wallenberg. Right? So what did he do? From the Mamish, from the Tzaddikim. So what he did was, he got passports. He got 10 passports. And when the women were lined up, he went and he said to the Germans, I've got 10 passports, you got to let me take off 10 people. And he was able to rescue those people. And I said to my mechutin, that's what I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to go to the Danube River and we're going to be mispalo there. So Alex says to me, I was there today. I said, really? He says, I want to show you something. Now, Alex Kramer is a phenomenal photographer. And he shows me the memorial that they put up at the Danube River. Look it up tonight on Google. Shoes on the Danube. You'll mamish faint. It's like this video. Just look at that, what it is over there. It's amazing. A whole row of empty shoes. Shoes of parents, shoes of grandparents. And the thing that will break your heart is the little shichalach of the little children. Empty shoes. That's the memorial along the Danube. I couldn't talk. I saw one frame after the other. I said, Alex, do not show this to anyone. I want everybody to be as stunned as I was when they go there tomorrow. And then I said, I'm going to tell the story about Wallenberg. He says, my mother was on that line. I said, Alex, what are you talking about? He said, it was before I was born. My mother and my older sister were on that line. And Wallenberg came with the 10 visas, and he was told he could pick off any 10 women that he wanted. And he took the 10 youngest women and their children. One of them was my mother. I said, Alex, tomorrow, you're going to tell everybody that story when we stand along the Danube. And of course, the next day in the morning, I told everybody we're going to the Danube. Yidden were shot into the water, and it's a Mokum Kodesh. We're going to daven there. But I didn't tell them about the memorial. And then when they got off the bus and they saw the shoes, there was such crying. There was such tefillah. I'm telling you, we sang and we cried. Al naros bovel sham yashavnu gam bochinu b'zachrenu as tzion. And we sang and we davened. And it was just the most moving moment to stand next to those empty shoes. What it symbolized. What a brilliant, brilliant type of memorial. That was the last day of the trip. The next day I came back to America. Wherever I went, I spoke about those shoes. It was the end of the summer. Comes Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Right before Yom Kippur, Rav Shlomo Tarabam, who we were speaking about before, Rav Shlomo Tarabam asked me, as he does every year, he says, do me a favor. Make the Yizkar appeal in Shul. I said, okay, fine. The next day on Yom Kippur, I got up and I said to everyone, I said, you know, something stunning happened in our Shul, Rosh Hashanah. And everybody's looking at me. What happened, Rosh Hashanah? We were all here together. Well, we didn't see anything stunning. I said, not only that, it happened the second day, Rosh Hashanah as well. And everybody's looking at me. And then I told them the story of the Danube with the empty shoes. And I told them the first day, Rosh Hashanah, right after Musaf, when the Kohanim duchen. So I davened near the front of the shul. My talus was over my head. And then when I took off the talus off my head, I take a look. By the HaKaddish, there's a whole row of empty shoes. Shoes of Zaydis, shoes of fathers, and shoes of little kids. I couldn't look at it. I started crying. I couldn't look at those empty shoes in shul. And then the second day I was already waiting for it. And I said to the people that we were about to say yes, I said, what's the difference between those shoes on the Danube and these shoes that are here in every shul in the world on Yom Tov when they duchen? Those shoes remain empty. That's why we came into this world. Yiskadav, Yiskadash, Shemei Rabbah, we should be Makadash Shem Shemayim. The shoes of the Kohanim, all the shoes that we have that are empty, we can put our feet in them. We can go daven, we can go learn, we can do chesed, we can go be Mavakachoyla. But those shoes remain empty forever. And that's when I first started saying that 6 million is a lie. Because every one of those could have had children and grandchildren. That's what the Pasuk tells us. That the Eibusha said to Cain, Koil demei achicha. The voice of the bloods of your brother are crying out to me. What do you mean, the bloods? What bloods? So Rashi says, the simple meaning is that Cain stabbed him so many times so there was blood coming from many places. But then Rashi says, no. What it means, the blood of his children and grandchildren. Because when he killed Hevel, he killed future generations. And that's why we say Kaddish tonight. When we're going to say that Kaddish, we have to know that Kaddish is not only about the people that were nifter. You ever notice in Kaddish, you never say the person who died. You come into a shul, you see a fellow saying Kaddish, you want to know, who's he saying Kaddish for? His father, his mother, grandfather, what happened? No. Kaddish is not only about the one who passed away. Kaddish is our commitment to them and to the future. That's why we don't mention the name. Because every time when a person passes away, there's a void. There's an emptiness. Who's going to fill that void? That's what the Oval says. I am going to fill that void. I'm going to be Makadosh Shem Shemayim. And if all of us tonight can take off our shoes and tomorrow morning and put them on, that's what we have to do. They died Al Kiddush Hashem. We have to live Al Kiddush Hashem. That's what it's all about. So I want to tell you one more story about a person that you all know of, and that's Rav Shimon Schwab. The most incredible story that you could imagine. Rav Shimon Schwab, when he was a young man, he was a Rav in a place called Isrinhausen. This was long before he was known and famous. He was a young Rav, and again, the SS guards were traveling all around Germany, making sure that the Rabbanim don't rile up the Yidden against the Nazis. And it was Parshas B'Shalach. And Rav Schwab gave a drasha. And one of the SS men was sitting in the back. And he had Rav Schwab arrested, and Rav Schwab was under house arrest. Why was he arrested? Because Rav Schwab was saying, I'll say it to you in English what he was saying, and then I'll show you how it happened in German. He was saying that we don't need an intermediary. We can daven to Hashem right direct. 3 times a day we stand and we daven, we talk direct to Hashem. We don't need an intermediary. So how do you say that in German? So Rav Schwab said, Das Yiddische Volk, the Jewish nation, braucht nicht kein Mittler. We don't need a middleman. The guy in the back heard, man braucht nicht kein, what did he say, Hitler? He thought, oy vey, what is this rabbi crazy? He's telling the Jewish people, mir braucht nicht kein Hitler. He didn't hear the word Mittler. So he had him arrested. And listen to this, you won't believe it. Rav Schwab every night went to sleep wearing his Shabbos suit. Not his pajamas, his Shabbos suit. And his children, who told me the story, they said to him, why are you going to sleep with your Shabbos suit? Listen to what an Adam Gadol, his perception. He says, I know these Nazis. I know the Germans. They could come in the middle of the night and they'll grab me and they'll hang me in the city square. You know what a Chilul Hashem it'll be if the Rav is hanging in his pajamas? I'd rather be hanging in my Shabbos suit so it won't be a Chilul Hashem Shemayim. Who thinks of that? In the time of Gehenna, when a person thinks that he could be hung, that's what he's worried about? Rav, these people were so great. And that's why we come tonight. And so I just want to end with this magnificent, magnificent story. We know that one of the heroes during the Second World War was Rabbi Ber Weissmandel. He tried desperately to save thousands of Yidden in Nitra and all those areas. There's a wonderful book that is written about him. It's called The Unheeded Cry. So now, Rabbi Ber, he came to America, Nebuch. He lost his wife and 5 children. He moved up to Mount Kisco. And then he had 5 children. Listen to what he said at the bris of his 5th son. He said, on the other side, I lost 5 children. And now, Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter has given me back 5 children. He said, they died al Kiddush Hashem. My hope, he said, is that these 5 children will live al Kiddush Hashem. And then he made one of the most brilliant statements you'll ever hear. He said, I hope that these children will be able to say, as they will say up in Shemayim, Nekadesh es shimcha ba'olam, let us sanctify Hashem's name in this world, Keshem shemagdishim oisai b'shmei marayim. Just like they are sanctifying Hashem's name in Shmei Marayim in the heavens because they died al Kiddush Hashem. And then v'karozeh el zeh v'yomar, the children in Shemayim and the children in earth will be able to say each one is Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. They died al Kiddush Hashem. They are surely Kadoshim. I hope that they'll be able to look down at my children and say they too are Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And that's why we say Kaddish tonight, and that's why we come here tonight. It is the Kaddish Haklali. It is the Kaddish not only for the general public of those who we don't know. It's the Kaddish for all of us. Tonight, we have to make the commitment that we will be people of Kedusha, that they'll be able to look at us from Shemayim and say Kadosh, 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 and then together we'll be able to say V'kara zeh al zeh v'yamar. Both those in this world and those in the next world can say we are living lives of sanctity. I thank Mrs. Russo, I thank the Schoenfelds, I thank all the sponsors, the Brachs and all the others. Hashem should bench every single one of you for bringing this night so that we should be able to be inspired and truly become the Am Kaddish. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for listening.